Spanish Main, take two. The reason I own this game is it's a Francis Tresham design. If you're interested in what I think about Tresham, first of all, I talked about it in relation to this game in my filing diversions. I tried doing this, and this is why it's take two, a little earlier, and got off on a tangent and decided to make the other video instead. But I also did a designer spotlight, one of two, I think, that I did, three, and just had trouble finding anyone else that I really wanted to dive into that way. I did Berg and Tresham. I mean, the next one would have been like Herman, Garfield, or Eklund. And I don't know, it's just one of those little trail-offs that didn't really take very well for me, even though people really appreciated them. My intention had been to play this and fiddle around with it a little bit, but I couldn't manage that. So I got it set up, and I'm going to do my normal, let's dive into the rules. But let's talk a little bit about the components, because they's weird. Okay, you have a hex map. All these tiles are unexplored. You're going to be exploring the Spanish Main, either as a Spanish conquistador type explorer, not really a conquistador, but an explorer, or as the British, what were they called? Not the sea beggars. There was a word for Frobisher and Drake, and now I can't remember it. Maybe just sea dogs. I don't know. I feel like I'm missing, like, my brain just doesn't work like it used to. That's all. And it's deteriorating fast. So you have that. It's placed on this foam tile, and I had a bitch of a time getting it set up. You use all but one of the tiles, and they're completely randomly selected. I used my little Jeff bag to, I wonder if he's still around peddling them. Anybody from Buffalo who knows, Allen Street area, he would go around and sell these bags, 24 stitches per inch or something like that. Maybe it was 16, I don't know. But it was his big selling point. But they, pretty material and nice little draw bags, and it helped him make some money without having to beg or anything. So yeah, we have this foam thing. Why is it here? Well, it helps keep the tiles in place, and it helps, you can push down on it to get under a tile or whatever, supposedly. I haven't really seen how well that works. With the smaller tiles, this isn't, like Magic Realm. It might be a big deal. I don't know. It seems like a minor innovation at best, and it takes up a lot of space. Like, it eats up the box, and you have to fold it over to fit it in the box, which means that it gets a crease in it and doesn't lay flat until you fiddle around with it a little bit more. So I don't know how great a solution it really is, but foam is not an expensive component, so you can't complain about them throwing that in. This is your money, ones, fives. These are your cannons. Now they're going to go on your ships, which are over here. Over here. These are sailing cards. And I should not be peeking. This is the deck of sailing cards. They look like this on the back, unless they look like this. It's the front that's exposed. Ships range from 5 to 14. Not all numbers are included. That number is the cost of the ship, the amount of cannons it can carry, and the amount of treasure it can carry when loaded with cannons. You can also replace cannons with treasure as need be. These are the sailing cards, and some of them are just a number, which will allow you to move around on the weirdest thing in the game of all, which is this. And some of them have a name on them, which means only that player can play that particular card. You start off with a fixed set of cards and with a fixed deck of remaining cards, which in a smaller number of players, a bunch of cards won't be in play at all. These little envelopes, I don't seem to have enough of them, but this is a used game, obviously. Someone had labeled them. They come with these labels, which supposedly match these counters. Let's talk about these counters. These are your ship or fleet counters, and they have a letter which corresponds to the letter on an envelope. And you'll put everything that's inside that fleet inside the envelope. I'm probably not going to do that, but I'll use the envelopes or something as some sort of indicator of where things are. But you'd put the ships and the cannons and whatnot, so the enemy doesn't know, so other players don't know what they might be facing if they come up against that ship. These are forts, which are handled in much the same way, but forts can only have like cannons in them. So the amount of cannons present in a fort owned by a particular side would be also hidden in that same way. Obviously, once it's revealed, then you wouldn't keep it secret until changes start happening, or it wouldn't be necessary to keep you secret. What else do we have? These, I think, are just a player aid. Either that or they're an appendix, but the appendix that they're referred to is this. And these are really a clever idea. These guys not so much so, because they're on regular stock, but this one's been laminated. And the advantage of that is, as this is going to tell you what all the different tiles are. So by the back of the tile, there's a certain number of each type of tile. Treasure locations will be indicated on the tile. Mines are located on the tile. I don't remember what green is. That may be the number of sides of that color. That can't be right, though. I don't remember what green is. So, chests, mines, all sea tiles are specified by this. Shallows are specified by this. Rocks are specified as well. All land tiles, there should only be one on this. This is a duplicate of this. So that's this space. Tiles with defense. That may be these numbers. I think that is, but I'm not sure. Okay. Right. So you've got two different movement systems for this game, one of which is handled on the high seas over here and for combat, and one of which is for the exploration of the Caribbean. Yeah, your turn order cards, just like in an 18xx game, they get dealt out, but they don't indicate your player order at any point. What happens is the seating becomes fixed by which captains you pick. You can pick whatever captains you like, and each has their own special capabilities. I had a bitch of a time building this out. Geometry is not my my strong suit. I could do a better job now, but this was the first time, so I thought it wasn't going to fit at all. It barely does if you get it just right. Okay. Well, let's start, and the goal of the game is to get monies, basically. Let's start with the working our way through the rules. I've read these once. It was a few weeks ago. I started working through them again in anticipation of playing, and I just couldn't do the pre-play. So you're going to suffer a bit here because this is not a well-written rule book, and I don't have a great grasp on everything. Okay. Treasure at the end of the game that you have on the main, or presumably on the high seas, I guess, is worth its value, but if you get it to your home port, it doubles in value. And you can buy ships or guns with that. Now, I don't know if wealth is at all useful for you when you're on the main, except as victory conditions. The exploration of the main is a hit and miss affair. It's not entirely luck, but the activities on the high seas are very much skill. There's luck in them too, but yeah. Here are the options open to a player at any time are defined by their position on this tactical options chart. Now this isn't a map, but indicates what moves result from the playing of various sailing cards. And you're probably trying to make it from somewhere, board one, I guess, to the homeward bound. I think we got flags here. Those might be the home ports, though. I don't know. So let's. This I do not understand, and the whole movement system, which is why I wanted to pre-play this, but we'll learn it as we go. What do we got here? Okay. Now, in order to move on this, you use your sailing cards, and the numbers on them indicate how many spaces you travel. And there's requirements of direction and whatnot printed on here, essentially. And trying to figure this out is going to be a bitch. I know that. Reading the rules through, I've got a vague idea of how it works, but until we start moving ships around, we're not going to see. And I think this is going to be kind of just a learning game, and that's it. And then I'm probably not going to do another because this is the kind of thing that's going to give me a horrible headache. It kind of reminds me, Tresham, is big games. I've talked about this in that other video even less briefly, but, his big games, Civ and 18XX series, were really brilliant innovations that caught on heavily. But it reminds me kind of Splatterspiel has some big games that are really, really well appealing. But then it has things like VOC where you blindfold yourself and draw on the map and stuff. This feels like it's that kind of weird, but it's not going to be based on your ability to make guesswork with a crayon while blindfolded. It's going to be based on a strategy of your cards versus this chart, because Tresham is very, very much an analytical type of person, and his games all have an analytical nature to them. Less luck. The sailing cards differentiate between the characters featured in the games because some of these cards can only be played by a specific character. They also start with specific sets. The small number cards are handy for interception and avoiding interception, and the -1 and 0 give you versatility of action. Now, you'll also be using these in combat. So, yeah, the -1 and 0s are used. Combat between ships, both at sea and on the main, is resolved by the number of cannons each ship carries. In each exchange of fire, some cannon are deducted from the ship being attacked to represent damage done, and consequent reduced potential for return fire. It should be noted that the attacker has a considerable initial advantage. Once joined, a battle continues until one ship surrenders or is boarded or make good its escape. Now, the thing to note is while you're fighting, you're still moving around on this thing. And, you know, there's something weird about that. Because this could represent huge movements, but it can also represent little maneuvers within a combat situation. The winner of the game is usually whoever has the most fortune. This is currency in gold and silver, the value of your ship and cannon. If you have treasure, and now there's an asterisk here, which they seem to use whenever there's a parenthesized thing. Maybe the formatting was meant to put that somewhere, I don't know. Or guns. On the main, this is also counted. The game finishes when any of the following events occur. The last tile is turned faced upwards. The bank runs out of gold and silver, and or no sailing cards remain on the stack, and a card is required. Now that is an actual stack. Cards go back on it face up, as far as I can tell, and players pull them off. It's like weird. There's just so much in this game that blows my preconceptions. Okay. In case one, you get to complete your turn, i.e. if you flip the last tile face up, you get to interact with it and whatnot. But the other two cases end the game immediately. The player who ends the game will not be the winner if another player has at least as much of wealth as they do. The winner will be the person with the most wealth other than, well, the most wealth, but ties go against the person who ended the game. But there can still be multiple winners. There are two special ways in which the game can finish. First, if a tile is laid illegally, and this is not discovered until a complete round has gone by, the game is declared void and the winner becomes the player with the least wealth. So, this can be done intentionally, actually. Secondly, so there's an asterisk here, which has nothing to do with this one. Secondly, it's just sort of a, hey, here's something else, part of this, why there's two special ways or whatever. Any English player who succeeds in sailing into the Spanish home port with at least 18 cannon wins the game immediately. Okay. And that's, I don't remember if it was Drake or Rayleigh. Jesus. I don't know. Sea dogs, yeah. That's what they are. Okay. Players find that any strategy they devise has a counter strategy which the opposition can... There's a lot of wordiness in this. If you play with a safe, cautious approach, you probably won't win because you'll not make the wealth that an adventurous person who gets lucky does. That's very, that fits the 1830 tournament idea. I'll run my company, without a care in the world, making the most money possible. Knowing that I will go bankrupt, but maybe somebody goes bankrupt before I have to. I find that horrible there, but it is probably fitting here. In this connection, it should be noted that the English usually has to be more daring than the Spaniards, and the game is designed that way. There are important differences between the two sides. The Spaniards start with 16 gold each and have 2 turns start on the English, who begin the game with only 12 gold pieces each. Most sizes of ship can be used by either side, but the 10s can only be used by the English, and the 14s only by the Spanish. Now, no ship is size 18, so no single ship is going to sail into the Spanish harbor with enough guns to win the game. Or to end the game. And that's interesting because under the basic rules, that's all you got. Maybe you could coordinate, I don't know. But I think that victory condition only works if you play with the advanced rules. And I'm afraid of the advanced rules, but maybe I'll have to do them because of that. Usually I like advanced rules, right? Okay, but this game just, I don't even have a concept. Okay, 10s by the English, 14s by the Spanish. Certain sailing cards are denoted as E5, S6. This. We don't know anything about the sailing cards yet, but we're told this, which means that they count as a move of 5 if played by the English or 6 if played by the Spaniards, which is the normal usage of the numbers, how far you move. Specific sailing cards cause each of the seafarers portrayed to have a distinctive character, but the differences are not significant until the players themselves have become reasonably skilled. Also, it is a player who takes advantage of the opportunities that occur who is likely to be most successful. So the following notes are only guidelines. These are kind of notes on how to win the game and how to play the game. We don't know the rules yet. Weird situation. I gotta swap batteries. Talk about the different characters. Drake is the most aggressive and violent. Hawkins is between Frobisher, is more capable of exploration type tasks, but he's still combat capable. Valdez is the sort of mid player for the Spaniards. Santa Cruz, Alvaro de Bazan, I'm used to him being Santa Cruz, from Armada, is the most able of the Spaniards in pursuing aggressive action against the English, but shouldn't be as rash as Drake or Hawkins. And Recalde is going to be almost a pure explorer. The action of the game is in 3 areas. The player's home port, in 3 areas. The player's home port, the high seas, and the main. At the home port, ships and cannons are bought and sold, treasure is converted into currency, and money is invested and sailing cards are drawn. Kind of like a Source of the Nile type of, you go home and you outfit another expedition, but you keep your ship and everything. You don't ditch it in Africa. Activities on the high sea are represented on the tactical operations chart. This is alternatives available to a captain while he's at sea. The status of any particular ship at sea is shown by the ship marker, I guess, on this chart. Ship marker can go over here too. Activities on the Spanish Main take place on the tessellation of hexagonal tiles. You know, I didn't look up tessellation. I mean, I can figure out what it means from the context, but it is a word I am not used to, which are progressively explored, i.e. turned face upwards as the game proceeds. There's a reason when 1830 was done, they needed a developer, no? All right. The tiles depict the territory known on the Spanish Main. This is initially unexplored. We'll look at them. They're kind of ugly when we flip them over. Well, I don't know. Given some of the maps, a guy whose tastes in games and mine align very well, and some of his tastes in the graphics of maps, Dutch guy, also align. But then some of them, he likes the hideous bubble maps and these really, really garish things like Divine Right that I'm just like, ugh. Okay. All the tiles are initially unexplored. They show the land as you might see it from the sea. Now, this is interesting because if there's hills on it, it's not going to be a full sea hex. You're going to find land on it. It might be all land, which can cause problems because you can't place an all land hex next to the sea. But that's one of the ways you can wreck. Shallows, rocks, these can do it too. But if you've got this kind of lower lying land, you might still find nothing but water. And if you've got this, there might be no land at all. There's a good chance there's no land at all in the space. So there's kind of, a clue as to what you're going to find and what you want to avoid, but it's not, it's not absolute. There's some randomness in the whole thing. You won't find all sea when you're moving to one of these, which is good because you wouldn't want, your explorers to drown because they didn't notice they walked into the ocean. It's okay if they crash into land unexpectedly. That makes sense. most have some land, coastland, islands. Coastlands have to meet, and you must match up with adjacent tiles, land to land, sea to sea. If you can't do that, the tile doesn't actually get played. It gets pulled out, and there's a black hole there or something. One of the tiles has rocks and one continuous land. Both of these will wreck any ship that attempts to use them. Some of the tiles depict shallows. These will wreck any ship 7 and upward, but have no effect on a smaller one. Now, what these say, how to parse this, I'm not entirely sure. If you enter rocks, you automatically are destroyed, I guess. If you flip one over while you're sailing, or try to move into them. There are 2 types of treasure. Treasure chests are yellow rectangles. Mines are irregularly shaped patches of yellow or pale blue. The silver ones are kind of weird looking. The gold ones look, I don't know, more reasonable. But we'll see as we flip them up. I don't want to show them because I'm going to play with this. In each case, the value of the find is shown by a number on the treasure itself. When the tile is first positioned, the appropriate number of gold or silver pieces is placed in a stack on the treasure site. Chests are represented by gold unless the banks run out of them, in which case the same number of silver pieces is used instead. It doesn't say what to do about mines if there's not enough pieces. It doesn't say not to do that replacement, but it doesn't say to do it. So I don't know. Forts are shown by a number in a ring. And that's this, but it could be, it doesn't have to be on Greenland, which is the highest terrain, I think. The tiles are listed in Appendix 1. I had a hard time finding Appendix 1. This seemed to be it, but no, it's back. It's here at the front of the book. You put the appendices at the front in England, apparently. Setup. You deal these suckers out. And in order of those numbers, you pick your characters, you rearrange your seating according to the characters. They will go Drake, Valdez, Hawkins, whatever. The game will hold 2. If there's an odd number of players, there's an extra English player. But otherwise, you have to maintain balance. The map is set up as I mentioned. Each player gets a marker. This thing. I don't know what that's for. Of their color to indicate who they are, I guess. I don't know. And they're sailing cards, which are pulled out of the deck. Now, the ones in brackets here are the player-specific ones. So this is like a Drake 0. He has 4 cards, which only he can use. And which I guess can kind of bone the deck if they end up being used. We'll see. They can create cards that other players can't use, that they must take. But then he also has a couple additional cards with him, and obviously that E5 S6. That's a powerful card. The Spanish sailors are somewhat less competent. So you see here, Frobisher has 5 cards. Recalde, the best Spanish, Valdez, has 1, 2, 3, 4 cards. In fact, they all have 4 cards. One which only they can use. So the English have a much better hand of cards, and they also have more restricted to their captains. All those cards, okay, so only the cards for the players that are in the game and a 2, 3, 4, 4, and 5, which are shuffled and then placed face up as the stack. Each English player gets 12 gold. Each Spanish player gets 16. In a 3-player game, the Spaniard gets 20. I guess they figure 2-on-1 is just too big a advantage. And now the game can start. And, you know, I'm sort of getting back into gaming after a couple of weeks. Yeah, it's only actually been a week, but there was a week between, like, I finished up Austerlitz very quickly at the end of a week of inaction. So it's been like 2 weeks that I've not been gaming at all, at least, except for one brief period. And my voice is kind of going. I'm not used to chatting this much. So I'll be back a little later. So, operation sequence. Players play in turn is given in, yeah, okay. At the start of the game, the Spaniards each have 2 complete turns before the English take any action whatsoever. Important fact. Your turn consists of 4 parts which must be performed. First, at your home port, you can buy ships and cannon, and you can build up your sailing cards. In the high seas, you move on the tactical option chart by playing sailing cards. This includes setting sail from the home port or the main. Oh, here's another entry to the board, I guess. On the main, exploration, which will be moving to, flipping over a tile that you intend to move to, movement onto that tile, any battles with an enemy ship, another one of these weird asterisks, but it seems to have an additional or fort, as if, I have no idea why these are here. Load a treasure chest and or mine from a discovered mine onto your ship. Unload treasure, and again, an asterisk here, but it's not here on the and or mine, and load or unload cannon to or from a port. I just don't get it. Arrival at home port and at home and finance, receive interest on existing investments, land treasure at the home port, and sell ships and cannon. All right. Now, there doesn't seem to be anything that can track your investments. We'll see. That's something I forgot about. Okay, purchasing a ship and cannon. Ships and cannon can be bought and sold freely at your home port. All purchases are made from the bank. Ships and cannon may not be traded between players. Unless the optional rule is being used, a player can only own 1 ship at a time. The number on the ship card indicates its value in gold pieces. Each cannon has a value of 1 gold piece. Cannon can only be purchased to equip a ship. You can't store them. Only the English player can buy the 10 ships, and only the Spaniards can buy the 14s. You set sail. Before putting out to sea, you're entitled to make your hand of sailing cards up to a minimum as follows. The English gets 5 card minimum. The Spanish get 4 card minimum coming from home ports. Any player setting sail from the main gets a 3 functional card minimum. Now that's different from 4 or 5 cards. Cards are drawn from the top of the sailing card stack. Again, it's a stack, it's not a deck. Obeying usual rules for picking up sailing cards. We'll get to those in a bit. Cards may only be drawn if the player is setting sail in that turn. Players who already hold more than the stated minimum may retain all their cards, but they're not entitled to draw anymore. Doesn't seem like you can discard either. The full entitlement of cards must be drawn once the action is commenced, even though this may end the game. And it's only when sailing from the main that any modifiers held or collected do not count towards the entitlement. Hence, the 3 functional cards. Whether you have to expose, whether you have functional or non-functional cards, and we'll talk about those when we talk about the sailing cards themselves. I think it's the 0s and the -1s that are non-functional, but I'm not sure. Moves on the high seas, such as voyages to the main or back, take place on the tactical option choice. A ship, and now again, not only parenthesized, but with the asterisk, or fleet of ships, is represented. Is it always optional? I don't think so. Are forts an option? I thought forts are... Yeah, forts appear to be in the optional rules. Maybe that's what the asterisk is for optional rules. Yeah, I bet ya. Okay. I thought forts were a necessary part of the game. Well, we may have to play with the optional rules if we don't have forts and we don't have the ability of the English to build a huge fleet and sail into Spain. Okay. Any ship or fleet of ships is represented by a marker on this chart, and moves are controlled by the play of sailing cards. Now, this is interesting. Marker is not well defined. This is called a marker, but then there's these things for the ships, and I don't think we have a... Here are all your components, do we? Tiles, we have it. Markers. Colored plastic markers represent the player's ships on the tactical option chart. The colors are the same as those of the specific sailing cards and are as follows. So, yeah, these are your ships, not these, but what are those? I don't know. Numbered ship markers are provided for use on the main, but these are only needed with the optional rules. Okay. All right. And they're not numbered, they're lettered. Okay. Boy. Where are we? You know, when I read the rules the first time through, I don't have the components in front of me. So it's not absolutely clear what's going on. So I expected little plastic markers. I expected these suckers to be little boats, not fucking tiddlywinks. And I think I'd rather use these, although they look a little large on here. But we'll see how they're used and how not, and what's going on. Okay. It's represented by a marker on this chart. The moves are controlled by the play of sailing cards. Cards are played face up to the top of the sailing card stack, i.e. they're the next card available. Any functional okay, the following rules apply. Any functional sailing card held, not a modifier, may be played. Still haven't defined modifiers, but, you know, that's life. Again, I think they're the zeros and ones. The movement must be taken in full. Shortfalls are not permitted. The move must be made in one direction, either along or across the TOC. No diagonals. This may be permitted. This may be in any direction permitted by the size of the chart. But that's important, the permitted. Ships may move freely over other ships, instructions, harbors, and even home ports. Several ships may occupy the same square. Only one functional sailing card may be played per turn. But if desired, a modifier may be played as well. This is placed on top of the functional sailing card. A modifier may not be played on its own. The move is then the result of both cards taken together, i.e. a 4 and a -1 would give a move of 3 spaces, not a move of 4 in one direction and 1 in the opposite. That's important because of the edge of the map, I guess. A ship ending its move on a square depicting a wind or tide arrow, I guess that's these, I don't know. Again, there's no key or anything. They just assume you know what they mean. Must then make an additional move as indicated by the arrow. If there are 2 or more arrows, the player has a choice of direction. But probably not this. Yeah. Like that's a double arrow maybe? I don't know. Where are we? If there are 2 or more arrows, a single-headed arrow indicates a move of 1 space, a double-headed arrow of 2 spaces. And so, these, I think, are your normal arrows. These indicate choice. And that's why but they all look different, right? Like, these are little tiny arrows. These guys are all kind of big arrows. Or at least arrowheads, because the whole arrow is not there. A ship ending its move on an arrow square and playing a 0 as a modifier remains on that square and does not move as indicated on the arrow. So a 0 modifier you wouldn't normally play, but you can play it to prevent the wind from taking you. I think I'll move on to shipwreck or instead of here. Okay. Picking up sailing cards at sea. Okay, so the rule for collecting sailing cards is here, but then it'll tell you all kinds of stuff. But the first part of that rule is picking up sailing cards at sea. So if you remember, there's a everything follows the rules of 5.5. Yeah, but not 5.51. Only picking up sailing cards at sea follows that. When at sea, you can pick up a sailing card instead of moving, but only if your ship is on a clear sea. Okay? I guess that means a space without anything in it? I don't know. Refer also to 7.30. Okay, so I have lots of questions here. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Yep. And so there's an asterisk here. The prior owner wrote an asterisk in here and put it in here as well. Don't know. I think they mean to use that optional rule, but maybe no others. I don't know. Such a card is collected from the top of the sailing card stack. If this should be a specific card belonging to another character, it's immediately passed to that player who adds it to their own hand, and then you draw another card instead. And if necessary, this process may be repeated until a valid card is obtained. Hey, you want to play your own cards because you get them back. But maybe you don't want them back. Another card is then drawn instead, and if necessary, this process is repeated. This could end the sailing card stack, and therefore end the game. The sailing card drawn may be an ordinary sailing card, or a specific sailing card, or a modifier, which refers to that player's character. There's a lack of commas here, which makes this incredibly ambiguous. I think what they're saying is you can draw any card, and it might be a card that applies to your character, and not, yeah. No more than one card may be obtained in a turn, even if the card is a modifier which cannot be played on its own. No player can ever hold more than 8 sailing cards, 7 with 5 or 6 players, which is what we're playing. When this limit is reached, an extra card may not be drawn and a card must be played. It is possible, however, for a player gaining a specific sailing card from another player to exceed the permitted entitlement. If this happens, he or she must surrender the necessary cards to the top of the sailing stack as soon as the other player's turn is over. The player may choose which cards to hand back. When several players are required to surrender excess, they should do so in the usual order of play. The game ends immediately if a sailing card is required and none is available. It does not end because the sailing stack is empty, because the next player may not need to draw a card or whatever. However, if a course of action which requires a card to be drawn is embarked on, such as a player building up his or her hand prior to sailing, or a ship on clear sea exercising its option of drawing a card, then the game ends at once, if there's no legal card available to be drawn. And again, he doesn't like commas, but this is clear. The other one, man, I don't want to try to parse that thing. I know what he means, but yeah. Okay, sailing shorthanded. If a ship is at sea, and again, this doesn't apply to your home thing. So 5.5, really it's only 5.52, 5.53, which impact the setting sail card drawing, even though it refers you to all of 5.5. Okay, Hey, this was written a long time ago. Well, no, not that long, 84. I'm here thinking maybe it was written back, I assume the way it looks that it was written back in like 72 or so, the components and whatnot. And that, yeah, complicated games were not really, the ability to write rules for complicated games wasn't well understood. Now, obviously it was, because honestly, Monopoly has a fairly complex set of rules when you cover everything in the game. And although the print is tiny on the original rule sets, it's a pretty it's a pretty comprehensive rule set. It's solid and tight. Now they had many additions, but I think it was pretty tight by the time you know Parker Brothers was putting out their commercial editions of it. This, on the other hand, Tresham needed a developer, and apparently he didn't have one. Okay. Yeah, I remember, like, 53 was not well written, and 53. So here's the thing: the Tresham 18XX games, the 29 series is his, and I don't understand how the game took off, like how the series became popular because of 29. It is the most fucking boring 18XX possible, but okay. 1830 is his, but someone, maybe Greenwood even, stepped in and said, I gotta stop and look. Ah, who am I kidding? Greenwood would have made a mess of it. But, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because he had his fingers on almost everything. But no, we've got a whole development team here, and I'm guessing Mick Uhl was heavily involved in this. He was a regular who was involved in the Avalon Hill stuff. So that would be my guess of who to thank for 1830 having actually pretty damn good rolls. I don't think there are any holes in that. But 1853 is just such a mess. I never had to read the 29 rules, so I don't know how bad they are. But 1853 has weird rules in it to begin with this bidding and stuff. It's all poorly explained, but most of it is 18XX type rules. The initial bid, though, no other game does this, and hey, that's why I ordered GMT's 18 India or whatever, because it's got to be better. But, there's some weird, cool ideas in 1853. It's just, I don't know how good a game it is. It kind of like this, yeah. Guy Clearclaw often talks, he's a big 18XX fan, often talks about how he wants a game to be sort of so complex in terms of linkage between things that, a person can't figure out, can't calculate what's going to happen based on what you do. That you make good and wise decisions and hope that things fall out well. And he's not in favor of luck in games, though. So just all kinds of actors making their best choices for decisions, and that it ends up providing a complex enough cyclone of material. Basically, whatever comes out the output is just, it's not knowable, but it can't be predicted, but it can be kind of prepared for or whatever. I don't know quite how to put it, but at least this is the impression that I get from him. I'm kind of like, I get a lot of that because I like the idea, like in an 18XX game, I don't know whether you're going to buy that train or not. I can see two paths for you, and both of them are good. I want to make my move so that it's sort of able to cope with either of those contingencies. And I can make that, but I can't predict what the whole pile of different players' moves are. Here, the rules are complex enough that, at least right now, it's very hard to foresee what's going to happen on here, and at all. And to me, that leaves me with kind of not a sense of, hey, I know what I can do and what I'm trying. So here's the thing. I should know as a player what I'm trying to do. And this seems like a big contradiction to that concept. And in 1853, I felt like the bidding and the way the bidding was handled, I felt like as a player, I had no idea what I'm trying to do. Do I want to put a big bid and get lots of cities in that bid or not? It was just a big complicated tangle to unravel. And there's ways that, like, that complicated tangle is a great thing if what it is I know what I'm trying to do, I know how to effectuate that, I just don't know whether it's going to work. And the easy way out of that is to throw randomness into the game. And sort of the brilliance of some of the 18xx games is you can't be sure what the other players are going to do. Now, when you start playing in small numbers of players, you can. I mean, in a 3-player game of an 18xx game, if I've got the time to sit there and pay attention to the whole game, I can look there and say, I know what your best move is, I know what you're going to do, and I am prepared for that. I know what your second best move is, you shouldn't do it, but I'm also prepared for that because I don't trust you. In a 6-player game, I don't have any of that anymore. And I've never understood, like, the people who want to play small number of player XX are probably people who want a lot more control over the game. But I find something so beautiful about a large number of players where it really, the decision might be obvious once you get to it, but a turn in advance or something, it's not. So, like, as another player, it's very hard for me to predict how the trains are going to fall. Even if I know other players' philosophy of play, should I shake things up if I'm not going to win the game? Because then I get a chance of being number one, like if I'm in number 2 or 3, or should I be preserving my company as best as I can? And I have my views from both directions on that, which may be somewhat inconsistent. Okay, let's get back to this game, though, and try to work our way through the rules, because that's kind of the point here. Okay, sailing shorthanded. If you're reduced to your last sailing card, disregarding any modifiers, and again, nothing about having to show them, I guess you just announce it, it's sailing shorthanded. In these circumstances, it must move and draw a card from the sailing card stack. This is done by playing the sailing card held in exchange for the next legal card from the stack. So I guess you kind of pull the card off the stack while you're putting it there and try not to expose the next card. I don't know. I don't like this stack. The normal rules of 5.51 apply in other respects. 5.51 is that you can only pick it up on clear seas, but then there is some other stuff. So I guess this is you don't have to be on clear seas to do this. This is a very precarious position because the player usually has to repeat the procedure using the card he just drawn in the next turn and so on. Consequently, the player has very little control over what happens, and this situation can continue for some time. The sequence can only be broken by the player reaching port, becoming shipwrecked, or receiving a specific card, which is not a modifier, from someone else. When sailing short-handed, a ship may use modifiers in their usual way. When sailing short-handed, a ship has to draw a sailing card, even if it is on a square where this would not normally be permitted, such as an instruction or an arrow. Okay. Now that's been clarified. It's what we assumed. But if a ship reaches port while sailing short-handed, the usual rule for exchanging from the sailing card stack is still applied. Well, we haven't gotten to that yet. The card thus gained is retained for future use. Yeah, you play your card and you get a card back, even though you landed in a port. Okay. A short-handed ship may still take part in battle, subject to the usual rules, Ref 5.7, which is probably battles, yeah. It's the whole section on battles, so. Except that it may not surrender a sailing card when taking damage or attempt to board. Board squares are treated as ordinary squares in such a case. Oh, okay. So these aren't get onto that board. These are board in combat. Landfall. Land ho. I'll get you on there. Someday we'll learn these. They'll come. They come up. I've read them. They don't. They pass through my head because I didn't get to fiddle with the board while looking at it, which is what we're going to do. Where are we? When shorthanded dismasted is treated as the equivalent of a shipwreck, but mutiny has no effect because the crew is too busy. Note that if you hold only 2 functional cards and elect to play one of them, the ship will be shorthanded next turn unless somebody gives you a card. Events at sea. Moves and actions on the high seas are depicted on the tactical option chart. This has 60 squares, some colored, showing red border or flag. Flag, red border, I don't know. Is this red border? Blue border. Yes, these. Black border. I mean, they're different blues. What the fuck? Arrows and chevrons. Oh, wait. Chevrons are different than from arrows? Wait. Other squares are clear sea. Okay, so clear sea has been defined. The clear sea and a few of the chevron squares are decorated in the style of contemporary maps, but this is not significant to the game itself. Okay, yeah. I thought all the arrows were blank, but okay. Embarking or returning from the high seas. A ship can embark on the high seas either by leaving the player's home port or when leaving from the main by way of the homeward bound square. Is that both? Home ports are shown on the national flags. Yeah, see, I don't think so. I think you come out of the home port. Yeah, so these are the home ports. This is where you come from on the main. I think you land on the main with these, but we'll see. Ships may return from the high seas, either to their home port or when arriving on the main by way of either of the land ho or the landfall square. So homeward bound doesn't get you there. That's only an exit, like the anus. Sorry. Reference to Clueless Dave. He used to love quoting, Captain Condom says the anus is an exit, not an entrance. Note that all of these squares are partly colored red. As these are only points of entry to or exit from the tactical options chart, there is no occasion on which markers are left on any of these squares. I'm not sure about that one. What happens if I land there? It's not specified. But, okay. I guess maybe you go to the main anyway. I don't know. Ships may sail from and return to their home ports without necessarily visiting the main. Also, a ship may sail from the homeward bound square and return to the main. If it's only sailing cars or 4s, this happens automatically. Homeward bound, 4 can't take me in either of these directions, and 1, 2, 3, 4 drops me on landfall. Unlikely, but, you know. Land ho and landfall squares may only be used for arrivals on the main. A ship arriving at a landfall may be placed on any previously explored tile on the edge of the main. On the edge. Edge is not clearly defined here. I mean, it seems like it would be these, but there could be holes. There can be bites taken out of it. So, I don't know. I just don't know. Where are we? A ship arriving at landfall may be placed on any previously explored tile on the edge of the main. If there's no such tile, the ship is wrecked. Whoop. Okay. I.e., if the board hasn't been explored, or if no successful exploration has been made. So that's the landfall. Land ho must arrive on an unexplored tile on the edge of the main. If none is available, the ship again is wrecked. Again, edge is not defined. Is it the original edge, in which case if a bite is taken out, these do not become the edge? I don't know. That's what I would read it as, but it's probably not that big a deal as long as you're consistent. A wreck will also result if the tile, when turned over, will not fit adjacent explored tiles, or if the external edges are all land. The one tile which is entirely land is bound to produce the latter result, but some other tiles have the same effect should they have to be positioned with continuous land on their outermost edges. The tile featuring rocks will wreck any ship arriving on it, and the tiles depicting shallows will wreck all ships of 7 or larger. These are some general rules that'll happen when we're sailing on the Main. A 4 or 6 ship is safe on land ho if it arrives on an unexplored, low-lying tile which is not adjacent to an explored tile. I think they mean shallows. Most of the alternatives range from mildly risky to almost suicidal, but players sometimes have to take risks. What? If it arrives on an unexplored, low-lying tile, which is not adjacent to an explored tile, a 4 or 6. A 4 or 6 is safe in shallows anyway. It arrives at an unexplored low-lying tile which is not adjacent to an explored tile. I don't know. I think they mean shallows, but why is it worried about not adjacent to an explored tile? A ship may only arrive on the Main at the edge of the layout of tiles. Where tile spaces have become blanks, no arrival is possible. Yay, it's covered. A ship may not arrive on a tile which has been exposed by a blank, but which was not originally on the edge. Excellent. Once a ship has arrived safely at land ho or landfall, the marker is removed from the TOC and placed on the chosen tile. Refer also to 7.14, which I think will be these ship tokens. The ship is not moved again until the player's next turn. And I am wiped out. So I'm going to put here, I would have liked to have gone on to battle, but man, special events and whatnot, my throat is dying, is basically what it is. All right, well, you know, I spend most of the day playing this damn video game because it just doesn't cut off. Like, it's gotten to the point where I have a couple hours outside of the game, plus sleeping, time and whatnot. But so it's the next day. What happens is I play and then I'm tired, and then for another hour I watch videos or whatever afterwards. I'm too tired to come down here when I think I can. I got to get out of this thing, but I don't know how. All right, to the events. The black and white squares. Board 1. This is significant if a ship is in action, otherwise it's disregarded. A ship moving onto board will capture the opponent at the end of the turn if it's still in action. Turn isn't well defined. I'm assuming a series, all the player rounds, but that means the players going later in the round have an advantage on boarding. I don't know if that's intended. It could be. A ship moving onto board will capture an opponent at the end of that turn if it's still in action. Refer to the battles at sea, which is coming up. If the ship is defeated during that turn, the boarding attempt is unsuccessful. If the boarding is successful, the vanquished ship must then strike colors. Dismasted. Whoever did this marked it up a lot. Now, some of it may have been, the highlighting and stuff. They're highlighting the areas that maybe should have all been bolded. I don't know. No, these are subsections. They stand out on their own perfectly fine, and then these, I don't know. But this is the price of used stuff. I hate used books for this reason. Textbooks, as opposed to picture books, I guess. School textbooks. When you get them and somebody's marked them all up, but, it's a hell of a lot cheaper. And if you look carefully, you can avoid this kind of mess. Although I don't know, because most of that's online now, I assume. The ship continues its voyage but must surrender an additional sailing card of any value, not a modifier, on every movement turn until it next reaches port or harbor. This extra card is placed on the stack below the card which refers to the move made. So you'll be discarding a card, or you'll be putting a card on top of the stack for your move. You have to put another one directly under that. Now, there is no indicator that you're dismasted. You're going to have to write this down or remember it or something. Lee shore. The ship will must either arrive at port or harbor in the next turn, otherwise it will be shipwrecked. And so here's the thing. The way they talk about this, maybe the next turn is the next time you go, your boarding takes effect, which would feel a lot fairer. I don't know. Like, then it's after a complete turn, after a complete cycle of players. I just don't know. We'll probably go with that. Mutiny. If the ship is not carrying treasure, it must return to its home port before visiting the main. Again, you have to note this with something. There's nothing in the game to do so. If it is carrying treasure, it may not go home until it has returned to the main and landed half the treasure to pay off the mutineers. Half, I assume, what I assume they mean by landed there is dispersed, lost. The treasure is then treated as a chest. Wait, but may not be claimed by the ship which landed it. Okay. If it is carrying treasure, it may not go home until it is returned. Oh, no, it goes back to the main, lands somewhere, and creates a treasure chest that only other players can pillage. Weird, but a ship which is sailing short-handed will not mutiny, and the square is disregarded. Ship ahoy! The ship must challenge an enemy ship if there is one on the high seas. The player may choose which ship to challenge if there is a choice. The enemy player must then disclose his ship card, but not what it's carrying. If the challenger attacks, proceed with a battle. But if he now declines action, the enemy ship may do a maximum of 3 points of damage to him immediately, assuming he has the cannons to do so, and the action terminates. Note that a challenge only results when a ship is moved onto Ships Ahoy. I actually hate Ships Ahoy, but a ship which is already on this square may not make a challenge in a later turn. A ship which is on a weather gauge may not be challenged in this manner. If there is no opponent available to challenge, the instruction is disregarded. Shipwreck. The ship and its entire contents are lost. The ship and its contents are returned to the bank and the tokens returned to the player. This might more or less knock someone out of the game if they've invested all their money in that ship. Because there's no way to accumulate cash. In Source of the Nile, you had publication if things went really well, if you returned. Yeah, no, if you died on the continent, you were just dead. So, whatever. All right. Positions of advantage and disadvantage. These are going to be the blue borders. Now, they say blue border. They're different. I guess they mean the line around the kind of shading that's being done there. Weather gauge. A ship on one of these positions cannot be challenged from Ships Ahoy, and a ship which is already in battle may elect to terminate the action immediately on moving on to one of these squares. And again, you're going to have to keep track of who's in battle with whom. Lee gauge. A ship already in battle must strike colors on moving on to one of these positions. This does not apply to a ship which is already sitting on them when it becomes involved. Oh, I'm fatigued already. I'm going to play with my hose a little bit. Yeah, there's a euphemism for me. No, I want to get some, it's dry right now, and I've got this, so, okay. Because I care less about gaming than what little I have. I have this little tiny tree here. Now, it was up there, and it died last year, I think due to drought. But there's a sprout coming out to the left of it, and I'm like, okay, it's giving me another chance to keep it alive. Funny thing is, actually, my hill is just really, really fucking weird. Let's do some random shit here. Basically, where this tree is, and this was not much bigger than that thing when I got the place, and that one was already growing, but was significantly was smaller than this one. And then there's that one, and those are the only trees I have that I've been trying to tend here. I keep planting more and they die. Trying to get some coverage over there. But this whole half, maybe to about this tree, more or less, it's a swamp down below. And there's water still streaming down. There's water still trickling down, I guess, through the wooden slats there, where I thought my wife drained down and tried to put her back. But, it gets really, really dry right beyond that. Like, you can actually see there's sort of a demarcation. Well, there's sort of multiple ones where the grass is all brown. It's not growing back after I cut it. Over here, it's growing, but not as fast. And then over to the side there, that's where it's. Last time I went down there, I'm still sinking, a couple inches into the muck, and I'll go down to my ankle during the spring or whatever. There's just so much water drains down the hill on the one side. Anyway. All right, let's keep going. 13 pages out of 20 or so. Oh, boy. Okay. Battles can only happen between the English and the Spanish ships, and may be started by either of the following events: moving into the same square as an enemy ship, this is on the high seas, or moving onto a ship ahoy square where there's an enemy ship at sea. In the first case, there will be no battle if the ship moving declines combat. In this case, it passes to windward out of range. Note that once the two ships are on the same square, a battle has not started. Neither party can launch an attack without moving off the square and then back on, which requires a couple of turns, I believe. In the second case, though, there'll be no battle if the challenging ship declines combat. However, and they tell you to refer to ships ahoy, the challenged ship has a single opportunity to fire, and it actually gets first fire if you flee, which is kind of weird. Only two ships are involved in any action. If there's a choice of... that may change with the optional. If there's a choice of enemy ships which could be attacked, it's the player who commences the action who decides which ship to engage. The other ships are not allowed to join in as long as the antagonists remain in combat. Once a battle has started, the ships remain in combat, irrespective of their positions relative to each other. Even if they were on the same square at the start of the battle, it's very unlikely that they will make the same moves during an action. Also, if the ship which started the battle did so by moving into ship ahoy, they didn't start out on the same square. Yep. Commencing a battle. When a battle begins, both sides reveal their ship cards to each other. They do not disclose cannon or details of treasure carried, but a ship may be required to show that it has at least as many cannons as it is claiming damage points against its opponent. The attacking ship now does 3 points of damage to its adversary. However, a ship may never do more points of damage than it has cannon, so a ship with only 2 cannon can only claim 2 points of damage, etc. Damage is usually taken by losing cannon. The appropriate cannon cards are surrendered to the bank. You can make change as needed. A ship which is required to take 3 points of damage may elect to surrender 2 cannon plus a sailing card instead of 3 cannon. Such a sailing card, which may not be a modifier, is returned to the top of the stack in the usual way. A ship which has taken only 1 or 2 points of damage, which is sailing shorthanded, is not allowed to give up a sailing card in lieu of cannon. A ship with only 2 cannon remaining, which is required to take 3 points of damage, may choose between giving up 2 cannon and a sailing card, or giving up its cannon and then striking colors. In the following turns of both players, each side does 3 points of damage, or as many points as they have cannon remaining, to the enemy, and then receives 3 points or less of damage in exchange. In other words, if A attacks B, then A does damage in his turn. Then if the action continues, B does damage and then receives damage in his turn. And then on A's turn, A does damage and receives damage. So if you're the attacker, you have an advantage if you don't break off combat. But if you do break off combat immediately on the ship's ahoy, you get shot instead. Once joined, a battle at sea continues until either one adversary strikes his colors or some other event intervenes. If a ship which is taking damage has less cannon than the number necessary to take the damage, including a sailing card if applicable, then it must strike colors forthwith. It does not have to strike colors just because it has no cannon left, unless it is attacked and is required to take damage. The distinction is important because a ship which is getting the worst of the battle may be able to escape at this stage even though it has no cannon. A ship may strike colors before being reduced to having to do so, possibly because the parties have reached an agreement over the distribution of the spoils, and neither side wishes to sustain unnecessary damage. When a ship strikes colors, the victor may seize any treasure it is carrying and transfer it to his or her own ship. No mention of whether or not you have to abide by the agreement. Any cannon still remaining may be thrown overboard. The cannon may not be transferred between ships in any circumstance. The defeated ship must then be allowed to go free. There is therefore little point in attacking an empty, unarmed ship. Yeah. A ship may throw some or all of its own cannon overboard to make space for treasure. In normal circumstances, treasure may not be thrown overboard, but captured treasure that cannot be carried off due to cargo limitations may be dumped to keep it out of the victim's hands. Also, any silver already on the victorious ship may be dumped in preference of captured gold. Because a ship may never be involved in battle with two adversaries at the same time, we're having trouble with that word today, it is possible for various special cases to arise from the presence of a third ship at the time when a ship strikes colors. Okay? We going to go into that, or just ignore it? Because I don't see anything. All battles are fought to a conclusion as separate actions, and a ship may not take on another at the same turn it is just disposed of a previous one. Okay. Also, a new battle may only be started as previously described. Another ship may not simply join in because the previous action is finished. Yeah, okay. Movement during battle. Ships in battle continue to move and pick up sailing cards in the usual manner here. By maneuvering on the TOC, a ship may be able to escape or possibly become wrecked. Bonus! And they list the different events and what happens. Things basically that end at home port, landfall, land ho, or a ship being wrecked ends the battle. Mutiny, dismasted, lee gauge, all those force the ship that reaches there to strike colors. If a ship gets weather gauge, the battle ceases immediately. No option there. Which is a little weird. If a ship hits board, the opponent strikes colors at the end of the turn if still in battle. And again, I think we're going to do that as in when it gets back to your player turn, if they haven't solved the boarding issue. If and it has nothing to do with the size of the ship, so like a small ship can board a large ship and take it. That happened, but a ship reaches ship ahoy, there's no effect. Okay. I don't know if we covered everything, but home port, yeah, maybe. If a ship reaches landfall or land ho, it is of course possible for a new battle to start when you go into the main. We don't know how to do battles in the main. That'll be soon. Ships and other items sold or lost. All ships, cannon, or treasure sold or lost due to shipwreck, battle, or being thrown overboard are returned to the bank and available for use again, which is an implication that the counter mix is to some extent a limitation, which one would assume in a Tresham game somehow. When on the main, a ship may take part of the following activities in the turn order given: exploration, movement, battle, loading treasure, pillaging a fort, optional rule. That's what the asterisk is for. It'd be nice if they told us that. Would have saved me some confusing. Landing treasure, or establishing and dismantling a fort. Okay. I kind of want to light my pipe. A little longer, but my tea is almost out. Exploration. Refer also to 3.1. Ship may explore any adjacent tile. This applies even when the tile can only be reached over land. Once explored, the tile is turned face up and replaced in the location it previously occupied. It can be rotated to any alignment which correctly matches with all the explored adjacent tiles. If this is not possible, the tile is not placed. Instead, it is left face up near the mat, and the position it came from becomes a vacant blank space. You know what? I think I'll put them in the box. A tile that has just been placed, or that has been placed in an illegal manner because it does not match all adjacent tiles, is a special case. Remember, this can end the game. I guess it can be corrected if it is seen before the player turn. That's probably how my game will end. I'm likely to screw up. But we don't know. I think it's a highly likely way that the game will end in most cases. Instead of exploring a new tile as described above, a ship may place any number of previously discarded tiles, in any blank spaces on the main where they may be legally fitted. Okay, we do have to keep them in sight. In this case, the spaces used need have no relationship to the position of the exploring ship. It's an interesting option. I didn't realize that. Tiles sometimes become isolated because of a blank space, but they may be rejoined to the remainder as a result of tile placements. Isolated in the sense that they're not part of the board anymore. They're just floating off on their own. A tile may be explored and positioned irrespective of any face-down tiles adjacent to it. Although it's not possible to inspect a tile prior to exploration, it may be possible to deduce facts or probabilities about it from the table of tiles of various types, and this player aid is going to be invaluable for that. A ship may move up to a maximum of 5 tile spaces when on the main. A move may, but need not, include a tile or tiles which were placed in that turn. A ship may not cross land. A ship moving onto rocks or shallows, if it is 7 or larger, immediately becomes shipwrecked. So, this is a little weird, because when you first hit the main, there's always a chance that you just get fucked. Like, you run into rocks or something. Okay. But what's not clear here is exploration versus movement. So, you are allowed to explore an adjacent tile. That doesn't appear to say anything about having to move your ship over that tile. So I kind of think once you're on the main, your ships are fairly safe. It's only when first approaching that you've got a real problem. I'm not sure how much sense that makes. It feels like if you're going over a sea, if you're transiting by purely sea movement, you should have to move your ship. And I've got to think about that a little bit. There's no examples or anything to help you. Battle. If on completion of your move you occupy the same tile as an enemy ship, a battle ensues unless both ships are unarmed or they're separated by land. There are also fort battles. Battles between ships on the main are different from those on the high seas in 2 respects. Firstly, they only continue for as long as the antagonists occupy the same tile and are not separated by land. This means that either ship may break off the battle by sailing away, although of course the other ship may pursue it in its own turn. And remember, there's an advantage to attacking. You get first shot unanswered. Secondly, sailing cards may not be given up when taking damage. All damage is deducted in canon. Otherwise, the battle works the same way. The ship which opens the attack does damage that turn. Then, for as long as the ships remain in contact, both ships first do damage and then receive damage. In that order, because if the enemy strikes due to your fire, you don't take any damage from that. There's no boarding in battles on the main, strangely enough. That shallow water, it's too scary to, like, get aboard an enemy ship in that. And it's not that shallow. If a ship strikes colors, the victor is entitled to seize any treasure being carried as previously. Surplus treasure and cannon may be thrown overboard, but treasure and cannon may also be landed if this is done during the turn it is acquired. And there's a rule for dealing with treasure. Note that the defeated or unarmed ship must leave a tile occupied by an armed enemy ship as soon as possible. Again, in case you kind of have to remember what's going on. This is going to be kind of tricky because of my tendency to wander away. A ship ending a move on a tile depicting a treasure chest may load the contents at once and place them in the ship envelope. Once emptied, the chest has no further significance. The value of the chest is shown and is counted in gold pieces, unless the bank ran out of gold, in which case it's silver. The treasure chest does not have to be emptied completely or at all. Any treasure not claimed is left on the tile and may be picked up by any ship which comes along. A ship may also collect the contents of a chest on an adjacent tile, but only in the following turn. This allows time for a shore party to be sent out for the booty. The ship may not be moved in the meanwhile. The party may cross land if necessary to do this. This is the only way to get the value of the 6th chest. When a tile depicting a mine is first placed, the correct number of pieces of gold or silver is stacked on it. If octagonal pieces representing, they say 4, I'm using them for 5s. I'm going to keep them as 5s. Are used for convenience, they must be broken down into single for loading. A ship which ends its move on a mine may discover the mine. No further action is possible on that turn, but if the ship is not moved in the meanwhile, it may begin to mine at the rate of 1 piece per turn from the next turn outward. The ship may explore while mining is being carried out, but the ship itself may not move. Remember, you explore adjacent hexes. Now, I think you're only allowed to explore 1 hex at the turn. It says you may explore any adjacent tile, but it seems to refer to it in singular after that, kind of. So I think you can explore a hex, and then you could try to move into unexplored hexes and see if you make it, I guess. Again, I'm trying to make up the rules that make this work. A ship which ends its move on a mine may, as I read. Any other ship arriving or the original ship returning must still wait 1 turn before starting to mine again. Any number of ships belonging to the same or different players may work the same mine simultaneously. English and Spanish ships may only work the same mine together if both are unarmed, because otherwise there has to be a battle. A ship may unload treasure on any tile it is moved onto, and which also contains land. The treasure must be neatly stacked face downwards and will be treated as a treasure chest from then onward. Why face downwards? I'm not sure. Treasure chest is treasure chest. Cannon may not be landed on the main unless you're using the optional rules in building a fort. End of turn activities, interest on investment, revaluation of landed treasure, and sale of ships and cannon. Okay, we'll finish the basic rules, then I'll go make some tea and come to the optional, because I think I'm probably going to play with all of them. At first I thought I wouldn't, but I feel like there's an important part of the game, the being able to sail into the Spanish harbor for a victory, that prevents me from... that makes me feel like I have to play it. The bank will pay interest of 1 silver piece for 5 gold pieces and 2 silver for 10 gold pieces invested throughout the entire turn at the player's home port. This is paid at the player's home port, irrespective of where the player may be. No interest is paid on less than 5 gold pieces, nor is it paid in the turn of investment. And I think 10 gold is the maximum you can drop on the board. We don't know how much a silver is worth. That's interesting. Okay. I feel like we have to look that up. Oh, it's probably either 5 or 10. When a ship arrives at its home port, any treasure is converted into coinage at twice its face value. It is then available for further purchases and investments. Ships in cannon arriving back at the home port should be sold back to the bank at face value. They may, however, be retained if they're to be used again in the following turn, or in the following turn. So, you have this option to like rebuild your fleet without any real cost. The game ends as soon as one of the victory conditions is achieved. Each player takes their score. Face value, all gold and silver at the whole port. Again, I don't know. Ships in all cannon, whether in a ship or a fort. Any treasure in a ship on the main. At half value is any treasure in a fort. And any treasure in a ship on the high seas counts 1.5 times face value. So it's almost home, so it's worth almost as much. Yeah. There's 2 special cases for the winner. Now, I need to see. Let me check the silver. I'll be back with the answer. The team seems to be operating in base 4 for some reason. So each gold is worth 4 silver. And then the octagonals are supposed to be 4 times as much. Oh, I don't know if I can cope with that. Like, I really wish they hadn't made that, because base 5 I can deal with. Base 4 is fucking weird. And I'll do that with the silver, but I don't think it has any impact on play with the gold. But the problem is, when they made the silver to gold conversion a 4-to-1 conversion, it should be pieces of 8, man. It should be 8-to-1. Yeah, that's probably why it's 4. When they made the 4-to-1 conversion, that makes me a little unhappy about like having the 2 things work on different values systems. I don't know. I know that I'm going to get confused no matter what I do at this point. All right, we're going to take a pause and get what's a little bit left of my drink into my throat. Oh boy. Okay. Optional rules. Multiple ship ownership. 2 to 4 players, you can have 3 ships per player. 5 or 6, and I'll of course be playing with the full 6. Only 2 is allowed. Subject to ships and envelopes being available. Wow. That's an interesting concept. Let's keep thinking. Each ship is treated individually in the ship card, and any items that the ship is carrying are placed in a separate envelope as previously. A player may still have only 1 marker in use on the TOC, but this may represent several ships sailing together. Ships are capable of independent movement once on the main, and the lettered ship counters must now be used for identification. So here's the thing. You might have a counter on the TOC to handle a ship that's out at sea, and other counters on the main. Ships may not move independently on the high seas. That's tricky, but let's see what that means, because that's going to like say, well, if I've got 1 ship on the high sea, I can't launch another one there. I think. Note that all the following are permitted. A player is permitted to have ships on the high sea and on the main at the same time. A ship at sea may collect sailing cards and then return to port. Then another ship may set sail using the cards collected. A ship may return to its home port, and in the player's next turn, another ship may leave from homeward bound. Guns or treasure may be transferred on the main by landing them and then picking them up next turn with another ship. Assuming nobody drives you away or whatever, but if they could do that, they could capture stuff. In most cases, the rules for using more than 1 ship follow those already given, but there are differences in connection with battles, instructions on the TOC, and exploration and movement on the main. On the TOC, ships may only sail as a fleet. All are represented by a single marker and controlled by the same sailing cards. All instructions are obeyed as previously, except for shipwreck, mutiny, and those relevant to battle, such as ship ahoy, board, lee gauge, and weather gauge. Shipwreck will only affect one ship in a fleet unless resulting from a landfall, land ho, or lee shore, in which case the whole fleet is affected. I don't remember what lee shore does. Lee shore? Yeah. All right. Gotta go look this one up. Ship must either arrive at a port or harbor on the next turn, otherwise it'll be shipwrecked. Okay. And that could be the whole fleet. Okay. Shipwreck will only affect one ship in the fleet. Yeah. That's what we had. Instructions relevant to battle affect all ships which are either in battle or are able to be challenged. Note that a battle or a challenge may only involve ships from one player on each side. Three-cornered contests not permitted. Battles are fought as separate actions between individual ships as previously. Each action may involve only one ship on a side. If several ships attack one ship, or vice versa, the attacking player has the choice which ships will be involved. Before making the choice, he must be shown the ship cards of the enemy side, but not any other contents of the envelopes. Once two ships have fought to a conclusion, a fresh ship may then join in. This may be repeated as necessary, but each individual ship-to-ship action must be completed to the normal rules. Now, this is different, significantly different, because remember, an extra ship couldn't join a battle from another player before. Well, now the same player, his fleet can send off one champion at a time. A little weird, doesn't feel like it's correct, but in battles involving two or more ships on each side, the ships are paired off. Once again, it's the attacker who decides how this should be done. A sailing card may be surrendered and taking damage in the usual way, and this will now count as 1 point of damage for all the ships in the fleet which are in action and eligible to discard. But individual ships must, of course, keep their own tally of the number of cannons which they still have available. Any ship not paired off may become involved in the battle if a space becomes available for it. Battles on the main, the procedure is mainly as described in 5.83, the original main rules. Even if one player has several ships on the same tile, no individual action may involve more than one ship on a side, although there may be several such actions in progress on the same or other tiles. Once again, it's the attacking player who decides which opponent each ship will attack, and once again he's allowed to inspect the other side's ship cards, but not their contents before deciding. I'm kind of questioning if this is worth, like, if the victory condition of being able to enter the Spanish port, which again was done, is worth all this effort, because it is the driving focus for me, but we'll keep going. Exploration and movement on the main. All ships in a fleet reaching the main, whether as a result of landfall or land ho, will arrive on the same tile. In the following turns, they can act independently, each ship being allowed to explore, move, mine, etc. on its own. It's now necessary to identify our players' individual ships on the main. The numbered ship markers should be used in conjunction with the labeled envelopes. So here's the problem. There's a limited number of envelopes. You're not supposed to be able to use additional envelopes if there aren't enough for ships, but there are more letter counters and these than envelopes, at least in my set. I don't have a manifest of what came with the game, so I don't know. Note that if the option to place any number of discarded tiles in blank positions is exercised, this will be the only exploration performed by that player's ships during the turn. Their entire fleet declares their exploration that way. But again, you can kind of explore, from what I can tell, by just sailing into unknown waters, I guess. Again, that's just me presupposing, but otherwise, there's not much risk about sailing around in the main. But also, you're very, very limited to your speed. Cannon ports. Cannon placed on a tile constitute a fort. Forts. The cannon must be accompanied by a numbered marker flag to show the nationality. The contents of the fort, which may include treasure as well as cannon, are placed in an envelope with the same number as the flag. The defense of the fort is usually the number of cannon landed there. But if the site chosen has a defensive potential, as shown by a ringed number, this number is added to the defense provided by the cannon. A site without cannon does not have any defense. Okay, so there's these numbers that are going to be on the tiles, and you'll see them. They may not be green in the center. Those are your good locations for forts, which add to the defensive capability. Let's keep on going. Fort versus ship actions. If a ship sails into or crosses a tile containing an enemy fort, the fort will open fire. Enemy being the other side, not just another player. The damage done to the ship will be equal to the defense of the fort and is taken in cannon. That could be a very large number. If several ships attack at the same turn, the owner of the fort decides how to apportion the damage done among them. If several ships attack in different turns, the fort attack each ship in turn. A ship or ships will then do a maximum of 3 units damage each to the fort. A ship with less than 3 cannon remaining does correspondingly less damage. This all happens in the ship's turn. There is no fort turn. The procedure is then repeated in the next ship's turn unless the ship sails away during the turn. Irrespective of its site potential, a fort has to cease action once it has no cannon remaining. A fort can engage ships on any sea on the tile concerned, and a fort which is in action is not prevented from attacking any other ships which may arrive during the action. A ship which is... what is the ordering? Looks like the fort gets first fire. But there is a counter attack on the first round, unlike in normal attacks. Ship which is sheltering beneath the guns of a friendly fort cannot be attacked or attacked back while the fort remains capable of action. What is sheltering underneath? I'm assuming it's just in the same hex. The owner of a fort retains its envelope, and if the fort is attacked, will handle its defense. If necessary, owing to pillage or additions, the envelope may be passed to a visitor of the same nationality. Okay, I'm not sure what that means. In addition to being attacked, let's look at pillage, but additions, sounds like you'd be adding treasure or guns. In addition to being attacked by the enemy, forts can also run the risk of being pillaged by their own side. Players of the same nationality have free access to each other's forts, and although they may not remove the cannon, they may take up to half of any treasure that may be there. A player may only pillage a particular fort once in this manner, but other players can also pillage it. A fort cannot be pillaged while the owner's ship is there, though. Both cannon and treasury can be added to a friendly fort and are then normally the property of the fort owner, but he may be persuaded to do a reasonable deal with the player concerned. It looks to me like you can take your own cannons and treasure away at will. It looks to me like you shouldn't be passing the envelope around unless you're cutting some sort of deal, although the rules say differently, and I can't justify that. Collecting sailing cards by exchange. This option allows a ship which is not on a clear sea to collect a sailing card from the stack by direct exchange with a 0 modifier. The ordinary rules are followed in all other respects. Handicap rules. Different players have different abilities, and some of the game characters may suit particular styles of play and produce unusually favorable or unfavorable combinations. 2 systems of handicapping are suggested for balanced play. The winner of the previous game starts with 1 less gold piece than the usual entitlement. The person who was last in the previous game, if there were 3 or more players, starts with an extra gold. Players can accumulate... Yeah, you're assuming we're going to play this a lot. Character handicap. This is handled the same way as the player handicap. Okay. Well, we're not going to play with that, obviously. All right. Well, that's what this is in terms of rules. And I'm going to take a shot at it. it doesn't, with the pieces lined out and working my way through with the video and everything, it scares me a little less than it has been. Of course, I've been having trouble, finding time to do just about anything in life, and I probably should have gone shopping this morning. I wasn't up early enough. Tomorrow I may or may not have an interview, and if I don't, maybe I should go shopping then, but that opens up a whole box of worms, because I keep my worms in boxes instead of cans. I mean, who the hell puts their worms in cans, honestly?